My job as a member of this administration is not to share my viewpoint when they diverge. My role in this regard is not president of all women's issues or running all women's issues across the United States government.
Do you wish you had, in that moment, spoken publicly to the American people? Or are you happy with the way that that was handled?
I think that when you hear me start to speak publicly on an issue that's active, it's because my voice isn't being heard privately. I wouldn't have my children listening to those ads. The negative ads, especially those, and almost all of them are a complete manipulation of his words and packaged for maximum impact. Despite what anyone may say, including the opposition, I know the man, and so do my children. He's a remarkable human being. He's kind and thoughtful, and he's an unbelievable father. For every critic, I would say, give him time, let him come into office, let him prove you wrong.
Women.
Well, so my campaign is about the fact that women are working at all aspects of their life. And I think there's this tendency to talk about working woman, the working woman. There's this caricature of what that looks like. We represent 50% of the population. We're all working at different things. We all have different priorities. And those priorities change through the course of their lives. My priorities today, as a mother of two with one on the way, are different from what they were 10 years ago, and likely will be different in 10 years from now. So I really wanted to create a brand that was celebrating the fact that women are multidimensional, that we're all working really hard at architecting the lives that we want to live and lives that are consistent with our personal priorities. And I do think there's this unfortunate and prevailing depiction of the working woman as, wearing a black pantsuit and being solely focused on her professional role. And that's just not true. And hopefully I can be a small part of changing the narrative around what it looks like to be a woman who works today. And that's the purpose of the campaign. It's not to tell people they should work or they shouldn't work.
Right.
It's not to push people in a certain direction. It's to celebrate the fact that we're all figuring it out. We're all working very, very hard. I know, for example, I'm more exhausted on a Monday morning after a weekend home with the kids than I am on a Friday afternoon. And I work really hard during the week.
Yeah.
So it's really about just enabling and supporting women in architecting this ideal life for themselves.
Your father points to you telling him that he has been on the campaign trail, quote, really misunderstood on his views about women. He has said some things about women that have shocked many people. About Carly Fiorina, he said, look at that face, would anyone vote for that? About Megyn Kelly's questioning of him in the first Fox debate, he said there was blood coming out of her wherever. Ivanka, what was your reaction to that?
Well, I think a lot of the sensationalism around this was orchestrated largely by the media. Look, my father is very blunt, he's very direct. He is not gender specific in his criticism of people and people that he doesn't particularly like or people that he does like but thinks they're wrong on a particular issue. So, I don't think that he's gender targeted at all. Like I said, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be a high level executive within his organization if he felt that way. So he's always supported and encouraged women, and truthfully, he's proven that over decades through his employment practices, through his hiring practices.
What would a President Trump do for women in this country?
He'd be amazing for women in this country. He would be incredible for women in this country, and he's starting to articulate his positions. It's not my place to articulate those for him. I'm not part of the campaign. I'm very busy, and he's kept me very busy working alongside my brothers and running the organization now that he's taking the step in terms of his efforts to try and make this country great again, as he says. So, I'll leave policy to him, but I can speak from my vantage point as a child and also from my vantage point as a colleague and somebody who works for him. He's been an amazing parent. He's given me every opportunity to succeed. He's been loving and supportive. He's pushed me, he's corrected me, he's disciplined me. And I think as a parent now myself, I appreciate how hard that is more than ever before. When I was 15 or 16, I was a little less impressed by how tough he was and how strict he was with us as children. As a parent now, I see just how hard it is to raise children with drive and with passion and with energy, who have a well-set moral compass, and he very much did that for me in his role as a father. And then as an executive, I've seen what an unbelievable leader he is. He's the most formidable negotiator I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of great negotiators. He is also somebody who really encourages people to achieve at their highest level. He sets very high goals for everyone who works for him and who works with him, but really he helps them raise the bar for themselves in terms of what they want to accomplish.
What are your business goals for Ivanka Trump as a brand, as the business?
Ooh, I have far-reaching goals. I think my goals are less specific and more general now. I want to continue to grow the Trump Organization footprint throughout the world. We have a hotel company, the Trump Hotel Collection, which I'm incredibly proud of, which is now the fastest growing luxury hotel brand. We have many very, very exciting property openings in the year to come here in Washington, D.C. with the old post office building, an iconic building right on Pennsylvania Avenue, in Rio de Janeiro, in Vancouver, and many, many others in the pipeline for the years to come. So I think the opportunity on the hotel side and on the real estate side is huge, and I almost don't want to limit myself by giving a specific goal, but the growth potential there is enormous. In terms of my own business, I really feel like it's in its infancy and I'm just getting started. I'm creating product in many categories that has been very well received, that I'm deeply proud of, and I'm looking forward to other opportunities in other categories and in international markets to grow that brand. Of course, my most important priority, my family, is growing and hopefully will continue to grow.
Congratulations,
So
you are 5 months pregnant.
I'm 5 months pregnant. So
your third.
it's with my third.
Congratulations.
So it's an amazing time and it's an exciting time for me and in my personal life as well. So I feel incredibly blessed, incredibly fortunate that I'm so happy personally and professionally, and I hope that always continues. Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here and to really affirm the United States' commitment to this joint effort, the reskilling revolution, and it's something that we have been deeply focused on in the United States, making sure that our booming economy works for all Americans and that nobody is left behind or forgotten. So we are believers, and you heard the president's speech yesterday. It was highly optimistic about what is in store in the future. We believe in innovation. We don't want to bridle or harness that. But with innovation comes opportunity, new industries that are being created that never existed before. Look at the growth in cloud computing. Mark knows this as well as anyone. He was an original signer of our pledge committing to reskilling 1 million people over the next 5 years. So we thank you for that, Mark. But there are industries that are being created that require new skills, and there are industries that are being disrupted, and then there are industries that are continuing, but the people working in those jobs today are going to require new skills to do their same job tomorrow. So we are taking a holistic approach to this at the United States government and look forward to this convening and opportunity to learn from each other. We've certainly learned on the apprenticeship front. There are great examples here in Switzerland, in Germany. One of my first foreign trips was to Berlin, where I toured Siemens, one of the world-class examples of on-the-job training and apprenticeship. So there's much we can learn from each other. America is trying to harness the interest of business in the shared goal of ensuring that the next generation of American student and the current generation of worker has the skills they need to succeed in the jobs of today and tomorrow. That's why we created our Pledge to America's Workers, which has become, at this point, really a full-blown movement with over 400 companies signing the pledge to reskill close to 15 million American students and workers. And that's 15 million lives impacted, 15 million families impacted, and opportunities created. And it really is an incredible experience. I've toured much of the country, visited close to every state, looking at these type of programs, and the question was about the synergies between the private sector and the public sector, and it's critical. Industry knows what jobs they are going to be creating and what jobs they are going to be displacing. They know far ahead of the government which investments they're making in productivity, which will cause a ripple effect within their workforce. At the same time, corporations more than ever feel a sense of civic obligation. And what better place to start than within your own family, within your own company? And we think that that is very important. So we're catalyzing a lot of action. We're also working as a government to create a national workforce strategy for the first time ever, combining 14 federal agencies to come up with a blueprint, not just for rethinking education K through 12, but how do we prioritize 0 to 5, which has been underinvested in, and then also post 22, which very little federal and state funding goes towards, except if it's, really advanced degrees. So how do we start to think about education and learning as a lifelong pursuit, not compartmentalized to a very short period of time in the arc of one's life? So the National Workforce Strategy aims to answer some of those questions. Separately, we've put together a council, an advisory council that has helped informed our work. And we have representatives from state and local governments represented. We have academia represented. We have some of the great entrepreneurs and innovators and largest employers in America, all lending their expertise. And we assign them with a very specific and tactical mission, which was not to come to us with a report or ideas that were redundant of that which we were already doing, but a defined set of deliverables that they were in a unique position to execute on. The first thing we asked this advisory council to do was develop a national ad campaign in partnership with us in the Ad Council, but it's private sector funded, private sector driven, to really debunk myths around certain types of industries. You look at manufacturing in America, there's 500,000 vacant manufacturing jobs. And yet there's really no robust pipeline of feeder into it. So people need to know about the jobs that exist today and be informed of the pathways that exist to fill them. In the IT space, Mark knows this well, the number of job vacancies they have, but many of them don't require a 4-year college degree. So creating this national brand campaign, which was unveiled by Ginny Rometty and Tim Cook, who are on our council today, is very important. And I'll bang through the next
That's a
three.
great segue into Mark, yeah.
Yeah, no, the next one is just data transparency. We need to do a better job of connecting workers with job vacancies and people based on the skills they have rather than the degrees they hold with the jobs that are available. Modernizing recruitment and hiring practices. Mark and I have spoken extensively about this, how our traditional forms that require you to list your credentials and preclude many people who have the skills, but maybe they were formerly incarcerated, or maybe they have the skills but don't have the credential. So not eliminating people from that pool. And then lastly, just getting the private sector to increase their investment in this training of their workforce and think about it in a rigorous, disciplined way.
Literally almost nothing. I mean, we were an active business. It was something the president ran on. He didn't shy away from the fact that he had achieved enormous success in real estate. It was something he was proud of. We were an operating business. We looked at deals from across the world. This Russia prospective deal never came to fruition. There was never a binding contract. I never talked with a third party outside of the organization about it. It was one of, we could have had 40 or 50 deals like that. It's not like it's a strange thing as a hospitality company or a development company to have a hotel or a property in Russia. We're not talking about Iran. It was Russia. So it really was just a non-factor in our minds. I'm not sure that anyone would have thought of it.
That you love
No.
being involved?
I'm not. I'm really not. You mentioned the Moscow example. That's a perfect example. There's nothing there. Yet it's created weeks and weeks and months of headlines. So no, I have zero concern. It's the culmination of a lot of hard work, but also really the beginning, because the program's now stood up and now we have to execute on a very ambitious goal, which is to empower 50 million women in the developing world by 2025. So we're very excited. I think you heard at the State of the Union, women are thriving. We're working really hard on policies to benefit American women. And we also recognize, though, that American taxpayer dollars are going to our missions overseas, are part of our foreign policy. And it's incredibly important to us that while we're proud of our legacy of being an incredibly generous nation, we also need to be accountable to every dollar that is spent. And through programs like this, we're doing just that. So this is the first ever umbrella approach, an all of government approach to saying, we know it is smart to invest in women in the developing world. We know it's smart to unleash their potential. It's a good use of development dollars. Let's coordinate all the work that's being done across the US government with a really focused goal, rigorous metrics, an outcome orientation, and strive to do it in a more coordinated, unified fashion, and also stand up new programs. Well, I, on a personal level, have been the subject of many leaks that I know not to be true. So I tend not to pay too much attention to leaks and anonymous sourcing.
Do you have any idea who the leakers
Some of them, yeah.
Why are they still there?
Some of them are not here. Right now, I take things day by day. I'm not going to get ahead of myself.
Can you envision a life in Washington?
I have to see. And right now, obviously, my focus is on being a good mother. Well, he clearly did not think that was the Star of David. So I think that it should have been taken at face value. That was clearly not the intention. My father's track record of supporting and advocating for Jewish people and for Israel is unimpeachable for a very long time, whether it being the Grand Marshal of the Israel Day Parade to the support that he's offered my husband and myself and our family as a young Jewish couple. I know the person and I know his intent. And she's a very good friend of mine. She's been a friend of mine long before the campaign.
Are you still friends?
Of course. I haven't spoken about the specific challenges about this next chapter with her just yet, but I intend to. I say give my father a chance. I think that what he's shown his entire life is his support and advocacy of women. Just like his speech on election night, it will focus on unity, on optimism, and on the future.
Good morning. I'm honored to welcome each of you here today to the White House Summit on Human Trafficking, honoring the 20th anniversary of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. On behalf of the President, thank you for joining me to celebrate this milestone and to recognize the incredible work that has been done across this country to tackle modern-day slavery, pursue justice for victims, and hold traffickers accountable. Thank you to Attorney General Barr, Secretary Scalia, Secretary Azar, Acting Secretary Wolf, Deputy Secretary Bygum, for all being here today. Under your leadership and in coordination with the full of government, the United States is committed to ending human trafficking in all of its grotesque and evil forms. I'm also grateful to be joined by so many members of Congress and special guests, including Congressman Smith, Congresswoman Wagner. Yes. Please stand. Congressman McCall, Ambassador at Large, yes. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Brownback. and U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich. Thank you, Callista. Further among us, and I'd love you all to stand as well, are members of the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, the President's Public-Private Partnership Advisory Council to End Human Trafficking, as well as recipients of the Presidential Award for Extraordinary Efforts to Combat Trafficking in Persons. Thank you. Each of you possess a wealth of knowledge and action-oriented approach that are invaluable resources in this fight against this crime and as we seek to best support survivors. Human trafficking is believed to be one of the largest criminal activities in the world, with an estimated 24.9 million people trapped in forced labor, domestic servitude, or commercial sex trafficking. It is also, sadly, one of the most lucrative illegal industries worldwide, generating over $150 billion in annual profit. This issue has no demographic limitations and exploits society's most vulnerable, often women and children, and particularly targets runaway and homeless youth. In 1983, Robert Fuller and Louis Malteris, two middle-aged men, both born with intellectual disabilities, were discovered working on a dairy farm in Chelsea, Michigan. Isolated from the world, these two men were working 17-hour days with no pay and living in squalor. They were hidden in plain sight. The ruling of United States versus Kobminski, as Robert and Lewis's case would come to be known, recognized that the U.S. involuntary servitude and slavery statutes were not sufficient in their scope, lacking necessary provisions to guarantee protections for these men and so many others. This case spurred what would become a national outcry for legislation to address modern-day slavery. In 2000, Congress responded. Under the leadership of former Senator Sam Brownback and Representative Chris Smith, whom you'll hear from shortly, Congress passed the monumental bipartisan Trafficking Victims Protection Act. This landmark piece of legislation changed the landscape of the conversation around human trafficking and elevated the U.S. government's capabilities to combat this evil. The TVPA created a number of protections for victims, ensuring that they had access to necessary services. It also sharpened prosecution capabilities, criminalizing a broader scope of human trafficking-related crimes and requiring convicted traffickers to provide full restitution to their victims. The TVPA enhanced prevention efforts as well, creating for the first time in U.S. history an office to monitor and combat trafficking in persons within the State Department. The TIP office, currently led by Ambassador-at-Large John Richmond, is tasked with producing the annual Trafficking in Person reports that serves as our key diplomatic tool to engage foreign governments on tackling this issue collectively. It goes without saying that the guests in this room at the TVPA ushered in a new era in anti-trafficking work. Over the past 20 years, this legislation has shaped how our country pursues justice for victims, holds traffickers accountable, and prevents further cases of trafficking. So that brings us today. Much progress has been made, but we recognize that this issue is still, unfortunately, so pervasive in our own communities and across the globe. In the early days of this administration, President Trump committed to bringing the full force and weight of the U.S. government to tackling this horrific problem. Since then, I'm proud to have helped him deliver on this promise, signing 9 pieces of legislation into law that directly address human trafficking. And we're just getting started. These bills, amongst other things, expanded on the provisions of the TVPA of 2000 to include required law enforcement victim training and HHS grants authority for academic institutions to educate teachers and students of signs of sex and labor trafficking, and so much more. In 2017, President Trump signed an executive order to dismantle transnational criminal organizations, including those trafficking human beings. This action elevated human trafficking as a national security issue, as traffickers' profits enrich their organizations at the expense of human lives. Further, the president has prioritized funding for anti-trafficking work, proposing a $42 million budget increase for 2021 that will enhance human trafficking investigations, prosecutions, and victim services. We are resolved and we are relentless in the fight to hold perpetrators accountable and restore human dignity for victims. This administration has fought and will continue to fight this crime and ensure that survivors can access the services they need. Human trafficking is not solely an international issue or a crime that must occur across borders. Human beings are being sold right here in America, in our own backyards and in our own communities, in neighborhoods across this country, in rural and urban communities, as well as tribal lands. We cannot turn a blind eye to trafficking that happens at home, and we cannot tolerate the exploitation of our own citizens. The prevalence of domestic trafficking was brought to a new light for me on a recent visit to Atlanta. Facing one of the nation's highest rates of human trafficking, the city of Atlanta has taken big strides forward to equip survivors with long-term care and the skills they need to succeed as they begin to rebuild their lives. One of those facilities leading this effort in Atlanta is Wellspring Living, a nonprofit providing a path forward to survivors of domestic sex trafficking. Wellspring's motto is to live and dream again, a beautiful testament to what I witnessed that day. I met incredible, courageous women in Wellspring Living's Women's Academy, which is dedicated to helping survivors attain skills for their GED, an apprenticeship, and a future career. A few of those ladies join us here today, including Jessica Hamlet. Jessica's story is one of remarkable transformation. Jessica shared with me her very personal and heartbreaking experience of being trafficked for sex domestically after surviving childhood abuse, losing custody of her children, and facing serious challenges with drug addiction herself. Despite all this, Jessica recently completed an apprenticeship at Delta Airlines, regained custody of her beautiful, sweet daughter, who I had the honor of meeting that day in Atlanta, and now works full-time for the city. Her resilience is inspiring, and I would be honored if Jessica would come up and say just a few words.
I thought the debate was excellent. I thought the debate was interesting to watch. So I enjoyed watching. Like I said, I'm a business person, not a politician, so I'll leave politics to other members of the family and the many people who are involved in the race on both sides.
Upper echelons.
Well, I think it's incredibly important, and I think companies who aren't prioritizing ensuring that women are at all levels within the organization, and this disproportion of men versus women and gender inequality. Anyone who is thinking in those terms and who's not being very proactive to ensure that their company is being thoughtful about the gender mix is simply going to fall behind. So I think it will be a self-selecting thing. I think in 10 years from now, the companies who haven't evolved will not be the companies that they are today. And I think my father recognized this a long time ago. I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't have the ambition, the drive, the passion, the commitment to what it is that I'm doing, both for the Trump organization and for my own brand, if he hadn't encouraged me, emboldened me, given me the confidence that I could do whatever it is that I set my mind to accomplish if I had the vision, the energy, the passion, and the work ethic to match. So I think really it's Leadership is about action. Leadership is about setting an example, and he's very much done that within the context of the Trump Organization, and that's why, you know, my brothers and I are equally at the same level, at the highest ranks within the context of that company.